In Inner Mongolia, on a piece of land that spent decades being hollowed out by coal miners, there are now 5.9 million solar panels generating enough electricity for 2 million homes, while sheep and chickens graze in the shade underneath them. That site is called the Mongi Blue Ocean Photovoltaic Power Station. It came online in November 2024, and it is the reason we are making this video. But before we get to it, we have 6 other solar farms to get through, and some of them are going to make you rethink what the word farm is even supposed to mean. Like and subscribe so you never miss what we cover. Number 7. Tengger Desert Solar Park. Before China was building solar farms that stretch across 800 square kilometers and set world records, there was the Tengger Desert Solar Park. And in 2015, when it was completed, the number it put on the board genuinely shocked the global energy industry. The Tengger Desert Solar Park sits in the Ningxia Hui Autonomous Region at the southern edge of the Tengger Desert, which is itself one of the driest and most barren stretches of land in northern China, a landscape historically associated with desertification rather than energy production. The park covers 43 square kilometers and carries an installed capacity of 1,547 megawatts, roughly 1.5 gigawatts. When it reached that number in 2015, it was the largest photovoltaic power plant in the world. It was developed in 45 separate interconnected phases by the State Grid Corporation of China and the Zhongwei Power Supply Company beginning in 2013. And it feeds enough electricity to power over 600,000 households through the national grid. When NASA's Earth Observatory trained its Landsat satellite sensors on the Tengger Desert in 2013 and again in 2019, the images showed the dramatic expansion of blue panels spreading across terrain that had previously been empty desert. And those images circulated widely enough that the Tengger became the first solar farm most people outside of China ever heard of. The reason that matters beyond the size record is what the Tengger established as a template. The logic of identifying land that had no other economic use in a climate with high solar irradiance and predictable sunshine hours, and converting it from a liability into a generation asset became the model that every subsequent mega project on this list followed in some form. What the Tengger also quietly proved is that solar farms at this scale are not environmentally neutral in either direction. Some researchers documented overheating effects and disruption to the local microclimate near the edges of the array in the early years. Others documented a gradual increase in local moisture and the return of grasses between the panel rows as the ground was shaded from direct sun and wind was slowed. China's subsequent projects built on what was learned here, which is part of why the ecological design of the installations that followed looks significantly more sophisticated. Number 6 is a completely different story. Number 6. Ruokyang Solar Projects. Ruokyang County sits on the southeastern edge of the Taklamakan Desert in Xinjiang, in one of the most geographically extreme locations in China. The Taklamakan is one of the largest and most arid deserts on Earth, its name roughly translating in local tradition to a place from which there is no return. And it has virtually no agricultural value, very low population density, and exceptionally high solar irradiance year-round because of its latitude and the near-total absence of cloud cover, all of which makes it exactly what China's energy planners have been looking for. In 2024, Huasun Energy completed what it described as the world's largest single-site heterojunction solar project in Ruokyang, a 4-gigawatt installation that uses high-efficiency HATE modules, a newer generation of panel technology with higher conversion efficiency than the conventional panels used in earlier mega projects. The project spans approximately 1,879 acres and connects to the grid through 4 220 kilovolt substations, the largest substations of their kind in China. The investment totaled 11 billion yuan. Separately, in September 2024, China Three Gorges Corporation began construction on what they describe as a 16.5 gigawatt integrated renewable energy base in the same county, combining 8.5 gigawatts of solar, 4 gigawatts of wind, and 3.96 gigawatts of thermal backup with 5 gigawatt hours of electrochemical storage. Total investment for that project alone is 71.8 billion yuan, approximately 10 billion US dollars. When complete, the Three Gorges Ruokyang base would have a planned installed capacity approaching 19 million kilowatts, with over 60% of its output coming from renewable sources. The electricity generated across Ruokyang travels thousands of kilometers through China's west to east power transmission infrastructure to reach the densely populated eastern coastal provinces where most of China's economic activity and population are concentrated. Ruokyang is not a single facility. It is a district that is being converted into one of the most significant energy production zones on Earth, largely invisible to the international media because it exists in one of the most remote corners of a country that has been building things like this faster than the press can track them. Number 5 looks unlike anything else on this list. Number 5. Anhui Weinan Floating Solar. The province of Anhui in eastern China sits far from the deserts of Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang. It is green, densely farmed, and for a long time was one of China's most coal-dependent regions. Decades of underground coal extraction had a predictable consequence. As mines were dug, the ground above them subsided, and when the water table intersected with the collapsed land, it flooded. Across large sections of Huainan and the neighboring city of Fuyang, former coal mining land became shallow lakes, unusable for agriculture, a liability rather than an asset for the communities living around them. Then, in 2017, Sungrow Power Supply Company completed a 40-megawatt solar installation on one of those flooded former mine sites near Huainan City. The panels floated on specially engineered pontoons anchored to the lakebed. The electrical cables ran underwater to the grid connection, and for a brief period it was the largest floating solar array on Earth. The title did not last long, because the concept proved itself quickly and the installations grew rapidly. The China Three Gorges Corporation later built a 150-megawatt floating plant on the same type of subsidence lake in Huainan's Panji district. And in December 2023, a 650-megawatt floating solar plant came online in Fuyang on a flooded mining subsidence area of 867 hectares, with 1.2 million photovoltaic modules covering a surface area equivalent to 1,300 football fields. That single installation generates 700 million kilowatt-hours annually, enough to offset 220,000 tons of coal. Floating solar in Anhui is not just an engineering novelty. The panels reduce water evaporation from the lakes by intercepting sunlight before it reaches the surface, which has measurable effects on water quality and microclimate. Algae growth is suppressed because light penetration into the water below is reduced, and underneath many of the installations, fish farming operations have been established, creating a secondary income stream for the communities where the lakes were previously just flood-prone wastelands. The combination of surface solar generation and underwater aquaculture in the space formerly occupied by a coal mine is one of the more striking physical demonstrations of what an energy transition can actually look. Number 4 sits at an altitude where most people would struggle to breathe. Number 4. Qinghai Gong Solar Park. The Qinghai Tibet Plateau is one of the harshest environments on Earth for human habitation, but it is one of the best environments imaginable for solar energy generation. At elevations averaging over 4,000 meters, the air is thin enough that solar radiation reaches the surface with significantly less atmospheric attenuation than at lower altitudes, and the plateau receives some of the highest solar irradiance levels recorded anywhere on the planet. Gong County in Qinghai Province, sitting at just under 3,000 meters, sits at the northern edge of that plateau in a landscape of dry grassland and rocky desert with no agricultural value and minimal population. Since 2011, it has been the site of the Talatan Solar Park, a cluster of photovoltaic installations built by multiple state-owned and private developers across a designated area covering 420 square kilometers that has grown into one of the most significant concentrations of solar capacity anywhere in the world. By the early 2020s, approximately 46 companies were operating within the Talatan Park area, and total installed capacity had reached around 16 gigawatts, with annual generation of approximately 18,000 gigawatt hours. The single most significant installation within the complex is the 2.2 gigawatt photovoltaic plant built by Qinghai Hydropower Development Company, a subsidiary of the State Power Investment Corporation, completed in 2020 at a cost of 15 billion yuan. At the time of its completion, it was the largest single photovoltaic power station in the world. One of the design features that made this installation strategically significant beyond its capacity was the pairing of solar generation with the existing hydroelectric infrastructure in Qinghai province. Hydroelectric dams can be throttled up or down rapidly in response to changes in solar output, making them a natural companion to large solar installations that vary with cloud cover and daylight hours. The Qinghai grid operators pioneered a solar hydro complementary model, where the output from the Gong solar complex is balanced against the Longyangxia hydroelectric dam on the Yellow River, effectively turning the solar farm and the dam into a combined dispatchable energy system that can deliver steady, reliable power to the eastern grid. That model has since been studied and replicated elsewhere in China and internationally. The altitude makes the Gong complex unusual to visit. The thin air, the relentless solar intensity, and the endless blue of panels stretching across a high-altitude landscape that looks almost Martian produce images that circulate reliably on engineering and energy social media accounts. Number 3. Kubuki Desert Solar Great Wall. The Kubuki Desert sits in Inner Mongolia, just south of the Yellow River's Great Bend, and for a long time it had the kind of reputation that its unofficial name reflects. Chinese environmental scientists used to call it the Sea of Death, a landscape of shifting dunes that had been advancing southward toward agricultural land and inhabited areas for decades, carrying sandstorms that affected air quality as far east as Beijing. China has been fighting desertification in the Kubuki since the late 1970s through tree planting and grassland restoration programs. But those efforts were slow and limited by available funding and the difficulty of sustaining vegetation in extreme arid conditions. Then solar panels offered a different tool. By 2017, the first sections of what planners were calling the photovoltaic Great Wall were under development across the Kubuki, and the concept was not simply to generate electricity from the desert, but to use the panels themselves as part of the ecological intervention. The panels are mounted 2.5 meters above the ground, high enough for sheep, chickens, and in some sections goats to graze in the shade underneath. That shade reduces the surface temperature of the ground by enough to cut groundwater evaporation by 20 to 30%. Moisture that would previously have been baked out of the top soil by direct sun is retained, giving grasses and shrubs a chance to establish where they previously could not survive. Solar-powered drip irrigation systems in the driest sections deliver water precisely to where vegetation is being planted, without the waste of conventional irrigation. By December 2024, installed capacity across the Kubuki Solar Great Wall had reached 5.4 gigawatts, and NASA's Landsat satellite had captured a before and after image comparison of the desert between 2017 and 2024 that showed the dramatic expansion of the blue panels across the previously empty dunes. The full target for the Kubuki Solar Great Wall is 100 gigawatts by 2030 across a band 400 kilometers long and 5 kilometers wide. At 100 gigawatts, the projected annual output would be 180 billion kilowatt hours, enough to supply the entire electricity demand of Beijing, a city of nearly 22 million people. Within the installation, there is a section called the Junma Solar Power Station, whose 200,000 panels, viewed from satellite altitude, form the unmistakable image of a galloping horse in the landscape. It received a Guinness World Record for the largest image formed by solar panels, in a project designed to be visible from space anyway. The designers at Junma decided to make sure what you see is worth looking at. Number 2 holds a world record that was set in June 2024 and was already under threat the day it was announced. Number 2. Midong Solar Park, Urumqi. When the Midong Solar Project connected to China's electricity grid in June 2024, it did so as a 3.5 gigawatt installation, which at that moment made it the largest single photovoltaic power station in the world. The previous holder had been a 2.2 gigawatt installation in Qinghai. Midong beat that by 60% in a single project. The installation sits in the Gobi Desert portion of the Midong district, just east of Urumqi, the capital of Xinjiang. And the scale of the physical infrastructure required to bring it online is worth describing in concrete terms. It covers 809 square kilometers, which is roughly 32,947 acres. It contains 5.26 million individual photovoltaic panels, each rated at 650 watts, using a monocrystalline bifacial double glass design that captures light from both faces of the panel. Supporting those panels required 1.23 million foundation piles driven into the desert ground. Connecting the array to the grid required 208 kilometers of transmission lines running from the site to a 750 kilovolt substation, from which the power travels eastward through China's West to East Power Transmission Project. The developer is China Green Development Group, a state-owned enterprise established in 2020 to focus specifically on utility-scale renewable energy investment. Total investment in the project was 15.45 billion yuan, approximately 2.13 billion US dollars. The annual electricity output is projected at 6.09 billion kilowatt hours per year, enough to power approximately 3 million Chinese households and, as one widely circulated comparison notes, equivalent to the total annual electricity consumption of Papua New Guinea. The Xinjiang location is strategic for the same reasons Ruokyang is strategic: high irradiance, vast flat terrain with no competing land use, proximity to existing ultra-high voltage transmission infrastructure, and a regional government that treats large energy projects as economic development priorities. The 750 kilovolt substation that collects the Midong output is connected to the main west-to-east lines that carry power from Xinjiang across thousands of kilometers to Jiangsu and other eastern coastal provinces. And then there is number 1. Mongi Blue Ocean Photovoltaic Power Station. In the Otog front banner of Ordos City in Inner Mongolia, the land spent decades being consumed from below. Coal mines extracted fuel that powered China's industrial expansion across the second half of the 20th century, and as the extraction deepened, the surface subsided, leaving a landscape pocked with ground depressions, unstable terrain, and damaged soil that could no longer support productive agriculture. When the mines were eventually exhausted and operations ceased, the area was left as a degraded wasteland, ecologically compromised, economically marginal, and carrying the kind of environmental debt that former industrial extraction zones accumulate over decades of operation. On November 5, 2024, the Mongi Blue Ocean Photovoltaic Power Station was connected to the grid on that land, and the number it brought online was 3 gigawatts, making it China's largest single-capacity solar power plant and the largest photovoltaic installation ever built on a former coal mining subsidence area. The installation covers 7,000 hectares, which is 70 square kilometers, and contains 5.9 million solar panels arranged in rows across the formerly degraded ground, because the terrain was irregular and unstable from the subsidence damage. Conventional concrete pile foundations would have caused additional ground disturbance. The engineers used steel foundations instead, reducing pile diameter from 400 millimeters to 100 millimeters, minimizing further ground disruption while still providing the structural support the panel arrays require. The panels sit on single-axis tracking mounts equipped with an AI-powered optimization system called Skywings that rotates each row to follow the sun's position throughout the day, increasing annual energy capture by 7.41% compared to fixed mount panels, and maintaining stable operation in wind speeds up to 18 meters per second, the equivalent of a level 8 gale. The annual electricity generation is projected at 5.7 billion kilowatt hours, enough to supply power to 2 million households continuously. Each year, the station is expected to save 1.71 million tons of coal that would otherwise be burned, and to prevent 4.7 million tons of carbon dioxide from entering the atmosphere. To achieve the same CO2 reduction through tree planting alone would require foresting 62,700 hectares of land. The total investment in the project was 12 billion yuan. But the number that sits alongside those statistics and refuses to be treated as a footnote is the one about what happens on that same 70 square kilometers while the panels are generating electricity. Under the rows of solar panels, fine forage grasses and sand-fixing plants have been seeded and are being cultivated. Australian white sheep graze across the entire site, moving through the shade corridors between the panel rows. Chickens roam across the same territory. The site operates simultaneously as a solar power station and a functioning agricultural enterprise, generating both gigawatts and livestock products from a piece of land that was producing neither when the coal operation left it behind. The ecological logic of this design, called agrivoltaics, is that the panels provide shade that reduces soil moisture evaporation. The vegetation beneath the panels helps stabilize the formerly subsidence-damaged ground. The grazing animals maintain the vegetation at a height that does not interfere with the panels. Mongi Blue Ocean is also the first large-scale outdoor solar testing base in the Gobi Desert, with instrumentation across the site measuring how specific panel configurations and tracking systems perform under Gobi Desert conditions, wind patterns, dust accumulation, and temperature cycles, generating data that feeds into the engineering of every subsequent large-scale project built in similar environments.